It's Lee from colouringqueen.net, and today I thought we'd finish up Cinderella from Eriy's World Fairy Tales colouring book. And I have Millie for company. Unfortunately, my fairy tale colouring book has had a little accident. So I left it on the coffee table the other day when I was colouring in the lounge room, and it was the first day that I'd left Buddy on his own since we got him. And I just left him for half an hour while I ducked down to the shops to buy a few things. And when I came back, he'd started chewing up on the corner of my Eriy colouring book. So, I mean, it's not too bad, but there are still tooth marks on sort of like the right-hand side, which he found particularly chewy. So I guess the dog ate my homework. But not only did he chew up my colouring book, he toilet papered the house, so I couldn't believe it. He'd actually, our other dogs, when they toilet papered the house, they used to just, pull on the last bit of paper on the toilet roll and then pull it down. But he took the whole toilet roll, and, I came home and he'd been chewing on it and toilet paper all over the place and whatnot. So clearly he had a paper urge. So I don't know what it is, but I guess it was because it was the first time I'd left him on his own. And I'd given him a Kong filled up with, little dried biscuits and stuff to entertain him. But I think he's pretty good at finding them. And he got through them in the half an hour I was gone. But anyway, he's a gorgeous dog. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's only a few bite marks in a colouring book, and I'll just work around it. But I hope you're all having a great day today. And thank you so much for everyone that left comments about Buddy. He really is beautiful. We're so lucky to have him. I'll pop another picture of him on here somewhere. And him and Millie are getting along far better. They're sort of sitting in close proximity to each other, and Millie has given him a few little kisses, and he's worshipped her, so that's pretty good. So pretty happy with that. But Millie's actually been a little bit naughty as well. We've got a fly screen on the window here in the colouring cave, and I think because we spend so much time on the balcony with Buddy and David when he comes home from work, it's where we have coffee, and I think she might be feeling a bit left out. So anyway, the other morning when I was having coffee on the balcony, I could hear this noise coming from the window, and I looked around. And thankfully we've got outside awnings as well. But I looked around and she'd taken off the whole fly screen and she was crawling out the window. I had to rush in and, pull her back, and David had to fix up the fly screen, and he's going to replace it with one that is either stainless steel or that pet safe material, because her with her little Zorro paws, she can really get through anything. The little funny monkey. So anyway, it's been fun and games with these two. They're so cute. And thank you to everyone that's followed Buddy on Instagram. He's got his own Instagram, which is Pud's Diary, and he posts to it every day. It's him that does it. I just press buttons for him. And we started that up because his original owners moving to Sweden, and they really wanted to keep in contact with him. They were so devastated that because he has epilepsy that he couldn't travel overseas with them, and they could take their husky dog, but they couldn't take him, and so they've been really devastated by that, and they really wanted to be a part of their life in the future, and they really wanted to make sure that he was going to a good home. So I hope that they feel that. He posts every day so that his Swedish family can see what he's up to, and so that they know that he's okay and that they made a really good decision leaving him with us, because he is such a beautiful boy. I mean, he is gorgeous. You might hear him in the background. He's under my feet at the moment. And so he's sort of making little noises and Millie's in her cubby house making little noises. So it's so nice to be in the colouring cave with both of them. And it's so nice to finish off Cinderella. I really thought that I would do Alice in Wonderland for my fairy tale picture, but I don't know. I think it was Valentine's Day, and when I decided to colour this, and I thought that this was a nice romantic picture for Valentine's Day. Although, you know, the concept of a girl sort of marrying someone for, you know, the money and the position and the security is not one that really appeals to me, but I can understand, you know, the attraction with Cinderella, but it's not one that really appeals to me. I think I always wanted my own career, and I didn't really want that, but I can understand that people would want that. No judgments, everyone's entitled to do what they want. I'd certainly like to have all the clothes though. I've got nowhere to wear them, but I'd like to have them. It'd be nice to have a ball gown or something. I could waltz around the garden in it, sowing my flowers. I don't. Oh, I have been to a couple of balls when I was younger, in my teenage years, but not in the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years have I been to another ball. So, or worn a long dress for that matter. So that'd be nice to play dress ups. And I was looking into Cinderella, I was curious about a couple of things. And so I was looking online about Cinderella. And I was really surprised that there's over 500 versions of Cinderella estimated in just Europe alone. Like so many stories of, you know, young girl sort of meets handsome prince type concept. So I didn't realise that there were that many variations on this tale, but when you think about it, it really is just at its basic, you know, young girl meets handsome prince and marries them and doesn't have to worry about, you know, money and whatnot. So I guess it's a common enough concept that there would be a number of stories about it. But I found it really interesting sort of having a brief look at it, and I certainly didn't look at all 500 or even find them, but I was interested to find that one of the first stories of Cinderella was a Greek tale, and it was, oh, I'm trying to think now. I forget so many things lately, it's unbelievable. So it was from the 6th century, and a Greek courtesan had one of her shoes stolen by an eagle, and the eagle took that shoe and flew it all the way across the Mediterranean, and then dropped it in the lap of an Egyptian king. And my apologies for the garbage truck doing the rounds in the background, if you can hear that. Unfortunately, I've tried several times to film, and there's been noise in the background each time. So anyway, this eagle drops that shoe, and then the king goes on this mission to find the owner of the shoe. And when he finds the Greek courtesan, he marries her, and I guess she lives happily ever after with him in Egypt as his queen. And then there's another story from China, which is a little bit similar. It's from the 9th century, and a young girl was granted a wish from some magical fish bones, and she wished for a dress so that she could find a husband. So apparently a dress is all you need. So it seems weird. And like the Greek story, the king goes on a quest to find the woman whose tiny feet will fit the shoe. And in this instance, according to the Vox website, the young girl's beauty convinces the king to marry her, and the mean stepmother is crushed by stones in her cave home. So the mean stepmother gets a bit of a loss there. But I guess the common story that most people think of is the one by Disney, and Disney's version being the happiest place in the world. And I love Disneyland. I'd love to get back over there and have a look at back to Disneyland in Anaheim, which is the only one I've been to, but I'd also love to go to those Disney Worlds in Florida and the one in Paris and the one in Japan. I'd love to go to all of them. But the Disney version is a lot more vanilla compared to some of these other versions that are floating around, which is good because it's got like the Disney magical stardust about it, and I don't know, I love the Disney version. I think it's just the ants pants, but you know, I'd love to know what you think and which version that you like of the Cinderella style tale. But the Disney version is said to be sort of based on the Italian story of Cenerentola, which was basically just a short story that was published in a collection of short stories. And in it, it's got all the characters that we know from the Disney story. It's got the wicked stepmother, it's got the stepsisters and the magic and the missing slipper. But it's a little bit darker apparently. I haven't read the full story. I've just looked online and found it, but I'd like to one day sort of sit down and have a look at all these different versions because it is such a popular story, and I get curious like a cat. Curiosity. So in this one, basically Cinderella character was forced into a marriage with 6 very wicked stepsisters. And I think this concept of stepsisters is very appealing because people tend to think that stepfamilies don't work and that some parts of the family will be treated differently from others. And I think the concept of stepmothers was particularly common back in the time when these fairy tales were created because a lot of women died during childbirth and then the husbands remarried to find another mother for their existing children or to find a mate for themselves because sort of healthcare wasn't what it is today. So I guess these concepts of blended families and stepmothers, that's why we see them so much in fairy tales and they're cast as the bad person. But in the story of Cinderella in the Disney version, the stepmother and the stepsisters are all sort of quite physically unattractive, whereas in the Grimm Brothers version, which is what most people know, the stepmother and the stepsisters were actually quite beautiful, but they were mean-hearted and mean-spirited. But in the Grimm Brothers version of Cinderella, she doesn't have a fairy godmother, and it's kind of sad because Cinderella, her mother was dying and her mother said to her basically on her deathbed, you know, remain pious and good and, you know, good things will happen to you. Because I always wondered why Cinderella put up with what the stepsisters were dealing out to her, but it seems that her mother sort of encouraged her just to be good and to be a good person and things would work out well for her. And that seems to have been, you know, what happened with Cinderella. It did seem to work out quite well. But in the Grimm Brothers version, there's no fairy godmother. What happens is that the father goes on some travels and he asks his daughters, you know, what they would like him to bring back, because this is, you know, back in the day when you would go to other towns to get materials or dresses and whatnot, and so it was quite common to to have things brought back for you. There was no Amazon back then. And the stepsisters asked for some dresses, and Cinderella asked him to bring back the first branch of the tree that his hat touches. So I assume it's his riding hat. And anyway, he brings back the dresses for the stepsisters, and he brings back the twig of a hazel tree branch that his hat had passed when he was riding under it. And Cinderella takes that twig and she plants it on top of her mother's grave that she goes to several times a day, and she cries over the grave, and her tears basically water this hazel tree twig, which grows into a lovely bush, and birds are attracted to it, and she is able to speak to the birds and have a relationship with them. Whereas in the Disney version, it's more about the mice and other critters, and there's some birds as well that Cinderella has a relationship with. But in the Grimm Brothers version, it's definitely the birds that they have the main role. And so then there's this ball where the prince wants to find a wife, and it's not a ball, it's a festival, and over 3 days he's looking for a wife. And Cinderella asks her stepmother if she can go to the ball, and her stepmother, being a little bit of a nasty piece of work, says you can go if you can pick out all of these lentils out of the fire within a certain amount of time. Now, what I don't get, and maybe someone can explain it to me, is why would you throw lentils into the fire and then pick them out of this dirty fireplace? I just don't understand that. But anyway, Cinderella went and picked out the lentils out of the fire because she got the birds to help her, and they picked out all the good ones and discarded the bad. And when she, had done that within the time period, the stepmother sort of raised the bar and said, well, no, you can't go because you need to pick out more within this time period. So she got the birds back and they picked some more, which I have no idea why all these lentils were in the fire. Like, why aren't they in the cupboard? And why are lentils so popular? I have no idea. But anyway, and so the birds helped her to pick out these lentils, and then I think on the third time, and they always love things in threes, don't they, in fairy tales, except for the Seven Dwarfs, which they've gone a bit overboard on now. But on the third time, I think the stepmother said, no, you can't go because you don't have a dress. And the birds went and helped Cinderella make a dress out of all of her old things. And I think she went and prayed on her mother's grave where that hazel tree is growing, and the birds helped her to find something. But there was definitely no fairy godmother in the Grimm Brothers version, and there was no sort of be home at 12 o'clock. And over the 3 days of the festival, every day, Cinderella would get a dress that was each day more beautiful than the next. But the slippers, the shoes, they weren't actually glass slippers. That was a Disney thing. And I think it might have been in a French version of the colouring book as well. Yes, I think Charles Perrault, a French writer, he had a glass slipper, which I think must have been a reflection of what was used in those times, like a lot of chandeliers and fancy glassware. So I think maybe that's how they got the idea of a glass slipper. But in the Grimm Brothers version, it was definitely a golden slipper. And rather than the clock striking 12 in the Grimm Brothers version, it was just that Cinderella needed to get back, I think, before her stepsisters and her stepmother had come home, because they hadn't given her permission to go to the ball. And she was unrecognisable because of her beautiful dress and whatnot. But at the ball, she still danced every dance with the prince, and he was still smitten by her, just as in the Disney version. But every time he asked her to stay or if he could give her a lift home, she would escape into once a pigeon coop, and once I think she jumped on something else, until I think the third time, the last time, he thought, well, this girl is not going to let me take her home and she keeps bolting from me. So what I will do this time is I will tar the stairs, and then she'll be stuck, and I'll have to be able to take her home because she'll be stuck on these stairs with all this tar on them. So I don't know that he thought this plan through very well, because when she went down the stairs, rather than her whole body getting stuck, just her slippers got stuck, and one in particular, and she was able to leave that on the stair and take off with the other one, which she put into later the pocket of her sort of peasant smock. So the prince's plan didn't really work out that well. And so it wasn't that she was in a hurry and left it on the stairs, it was because it was actually stuck there with tar, the stuff that's put on roads nowadays, which seems a bit odd to be putting it on the palace stairs, but each to their own. He was a keen bean, that prince. And so then the prince in the Grimm Brothers version, he goes around looking for who should fit in the shoe. And first of all, the first stepsister tries it on, and I can't remember her name, to be honest. And she says it didn't fit because she took it to her room, and her stepmother said, look, cut off your toe, because when you're a queen, you won't need to walk. And so the stepsister cut off her toe, the things that you would do to be a princess, I don't know. And then her foot fit the glass slipper, of which there was only one, so she only needed to cut one toe off. And she sort of took off in the carriage with the prince. But unfortunately her plans went awry when all the little birds followed the prince and sort of chirped out that there was blood in the slipper, and so therefore it couldn't have been Cinderella, the one that he was after. So he went back to the house knowing that this girl must be in this house before, because he'd followed her in her escapes of him previously. And the second stepsister tries on the glass, well, the golden slipper, as it was then, and her heel was too big, and her stepmother said, well, shave off a bit of your heel, because when you're queen, you won't need to walk anywhere. And so the stepsister did that and took off some clumps of her heel so that the slipper would fit, and off she drove in the carriage with the prince. What always gets me about that part of the story is, like, it wasn't a masked ball, so does this prince not know who he's been dancing with all evening? Like, doesn't he know heights and weights and faces? I just don't understand this part, but I guess it is a fairy tale, and it's not meant to be logical, it's meant to be magical, but I don't get it, and I still don't get the thing with the lentils. I don't understand that. But each to their own, it's not my fairy tale. And anyway, he went back to the house and he said, surely there's someone else here. And that's when Cinderella, I think, was introduced. And the stepmother and sisters, not being able to bear the thought that it could be Cinderella that marries a prince, broke the glass slipper that had been brought around by the prince so that she couldn't try it on. But luckily Cinders had the other half of the pair in her pocket, and she was able to put that on, and obviously the prince said, yes, that's my girl, and off they went into the sunset. But I don't know, like, how big is this pocket that you could fit a whole shoe in? I don't know that that's very believable. But I'd also really like to know what happened afterwards. What was married life like for Cinderella that only met this guy on 3 occasions? I don't understand. But at the wedding, which was extremely quick, the stepmother and stepsisters were invited, and I think the stepsisters were bridesmaids. But they couldn't enjoy it for too long because all of those little birds that Cinderella had made friends with came along and pecked out their eyes as vengeance for being so nasty to their lovely Cinderella. So I guess there's a bit of karma happening there, which is good. We like a bit of karma in our fairy tales. But I've got to say, I prefer the Disney version to the Grimm Brothers version. I don't like all that nastiness and, I don't know, looking for lentils in fireplaces. It doesn't really appeal to me, but the Disney version where you've got this lovely fairy godmother and you get the 3 wishes, or you've got the beautiful little birds and mice and everyone swanning around to help Cinderella go to this ball, I find far more appealing. And I think in the Grimm Brothers version, all her dresses were gold and silver because that's what she asked for, to rain down gold and silver. Whereas I like the blue version of the dress that Disney did. I think that's far nicer than the gold and silver. I don't want to wear a gold and silver dress to a ball. I think it's a bit too over the top. But obviously back in those days it probably wasn't. But it's an interesting story, I think, Cinderella, when you look at it further and you look at why it appeals to people and why people still love Cinderella, this whole rags to riches story and finding a handsome prince. I think it appeals to a lot of things in our nature, like security and the good versus bad and rags to riches type things. So I think it's got a lot of widespread appeal even now, so many years later. But the thing is that Cinderella was never really rags to riches. I mean, she was pretty middle class when her mother was alive. It's just that when her father remarried the stepmother, that she became a position of a servant rather than part of the household. Whereas if her mother had still been alive, she would have been one of those that would have been invited to the ball. And then that makes me wonder about Cinderella's father. Like, I get that he travelled around a lot for his work, but was he so oblivious to the way that his daughter was being treated by the sisters and by the mother that he just stood back and did nothing? Like, why didn't he just get a maid? Or, I just don't understand how he stood by and let her be treated in this way. So I can understand that Cinderella did because, she promised her mother that she would be good and righteous, but I don't get why the father just ignored her treatment. And I think that's a thing that we see a lot nowadays too. There's people and they ignore what's going on in their own family because they don't want to deal with it, or they want to be wrong about it. They don't believe that people could do such things. I don't know. It's all very interesting. Lots of interesting issues there, but I don't want to overthink it too much. But anyway, back to Cinderella. I'm going to try this time to put some white dots on things, and if you know me, I have terrible experience with putting white dots on things. I admire anyone that can put white dots on things, because usually when I do it, I am never happy. First of all, I can never get one of my many gel pens to work beyond 1 or 2 white dots before I get really frustrated with it. And second of all, if I do it with like Posca or a Molotow paint pen or Stationery Corner, I've got all different brands, but if I do it with one of those, I either make big blobs or the white dots turn out really well, but I don't like it and think that it looks kind of odd. and so then I wait for it to dry and I pick it off with my fingernail or with a razor blade sometimes if I can't get it off, because it feels really self-conscious to me and I think, oh no, I better take it off. So this time I'm going to go for broke and I'm going to try some white dots and I'll see how it goes. I hope I don't mess it up, but I'll take a picture before I put the white dots on, and then I'll put the white dots on and we'll see what happens. And silver, it's the same. Whenever I've tried to add a bit of silver or gold to things, I see people doing it on Instagram and theirs looks so organic and natural, and mine just looks so forced and awful that again I wait for it to dry and then I pick it off. I don't know, do you guys do anything like that? I know it's just a colouring book and right now it's a damaged one because Buddy's eaten the corner of it, but sometimes I really overthink these things and I shouldn't. I should just let it be what it's going to be. So I decided to do the dress all in blue. If you know me, it's because I've got this blue thing happening at the moment. I really like blue at the moment. I really don't like any other colours. And also for me, the Disney version of Cinderella in blue is one of my favourites, and so I really had to go with that, rather than this gold and silver concept that the Grimm brothers introduced us to. I'm not too keen on that. I think the punctum in Cinderella, from what I read online, and I'll link it below where I read this, I think the punctum was the French writer who invented the punctum concept. I don't know how Cinderella got to the festival otherwise in the other stories. Maybe she just took a normal horse and cart that you normally would. Don't know. I wonder what Cinderella would be like nowadays if we had a new tale, a new fairy tale. And that's the other thing that really makes me wonder is, why are all the fairy tales from hundreds of years ago, why aren't we writing new fairy tales now? Or are they only to be found in the children's section of bookshops and therefore something that I may have missed? These are the questions that I want to know. So if there's any modern day fairy tales, like from, you know, the last 50 odd years, I'd really like to know. I really would love to hear about them. So if you know of any, can you pop them in the comments below? Because we don't have children, so maybe I'm missing something. But I don't call, you know, Minions or Lego or any of those sorts of things fairy tales. I'd really like to know, like, a modern day fairy tale, what that would be, and, you know, is there a modern day Cinderella that Disney's invented that I don't know about? I'd really like to know these things. I think the classics are my favourite fairy tales, like Cinderella and Snow White, and obviously Alice in Wonderland. They're the ones that I love. Little Red Riding Hood, all of those ones. But I'd love to know if there's some sort of modern day equivalent of those that aren't a sort of copy of those classics, but something original in its own right. And I mean, with all the countries in the world and all the writers and artists, you think that there would be. And I'm sure there must be. It just must be something that I don't know about. Perhaps because we don't have children or any sort of reason to look in maybe that section of the bookstores nowadays. But I'd really like to know if there's things that I should check out. And maybe they've got a colouring book that I could colour as well. I'll probably remember as soon as this video finishes some modern day ones, but right now my mind is just mush and I can't remember it at all. But anyway, thank you for joining me today on my last video for Fairy Tales in February. I hope that you are able to join me in March for Markover in March, which is colouring anything from Clara Makova's colouring books or postcards. And Clara's books are very expensive and hard to get. So if you don't have them, Clara has free downloads on her website, including the fairy story that you can download and print out on your own paper and colour in. And if you don't have a printer, most libraries will allow you to use their printer just at a very small cost, or sometimes even free. So anyway, that's it for me. I'm going to put the finished picture of Cinderella at the end here. And until next time, stay safe and happy colouring.